My family has a tradition of passing down the business to whoever puts in the work. I gave 8 years of my life to that promise. Then I walked into a meeting and watched my father hand it to someone who'd never missed a single comfortable night of sleep for it. I joined Callaway Fabrications at 22, straight out of college. My grandfather Renwick had built it from a single warehouse and a truck he couldn't afford to insure. By the time I arrived, it had 17 employees and contracts with 4 regional distributors. I didn't walk in as the heir. I walked in as the guy who swept the loading dock on his first day because Renwick told me to, and I didn't argue. 8 years. I learned every role before I held a title. Took calls at 2 a.m. when shipments went sideways. Drove 4 hours each way to save a client relationship my father had let go cold. When Renwick stepped back at 76, he sat across from me in his office and said the company was mine to protect. I felt the weight of that, and I didn't flinch from it. What I didn't know was that my uncle Darren had been having a different conversation with my father for years. Darren's son Beckett had an MBA from a school with a good name and hands that had never touched a freight invoice. But Darren was patient, and my father was proud in ways that made him easy to work on. Golf rounds I wasn't invited to, dinners I heard about later. A slow and quiet campaign I only understood in hindsight. 3 weeks after Renwick's conversation with me, I was called into what I thought was a budget review. My father sat at the head of the table, Darren beside him. Beckett was there in a jacket that still had the fold lines from the packaging. They walked me through a restructuring. Beckett would take the operational title. I would move into a senior advisory role. They used the word transition like it was doing them a favor. I counted how many times because it kept my face from doing anything I'd regret. I asked one question, whether Renwick knew about this meeting. Nobody answered. That was its own answer. I excused myself, stood in the bathroom with the water running, and thought carefully, the way 8 years of actual work had taught me to think. Then I went back to the table and told them the proposal was interesting and I'd need a few days to review anything formal. Darren smiled at my father. Beckett straightened his jacket. What none of them knew was that 2 months earlier, Renwick had restructured the ownership documents over concerns about estate complications. 42% of Callaway Fabrications had been transferred directly into my name. My father had been listed as a witness. He had signed without reading. I called my own attorney that evening. 4 days later, I had the full picture. Any restructuring required my written consent as a 42% stakeholder. The language was clean and unambiguous. Renwick had known exactly what he was building when he built it. I gave them 3 weeks of normal. Showed up every morning. Had lunch with my father twice. Let Darren believe the thing he thought had happened had actually happened. Then I called a formal board meeting. Renwick's oldest business partner held the remaining shares and had known about the transfer since the day it was filed. He voted with me, as Renwick had asked him to in a letter written the same afternoon the paperwork was signed. Beckett's appointment required full board approval. It did not receive it. My father called me that night. I let him say everything he needed to say. When he finished, I told him I loved him and that I would see him Monday. He didn't respond. I waited, then said quietly, Renwick built this. I'm going to keep building it. Then I hung up. Beckett was gone within 6 weeks. Darren stopped coming to family gatherings not long after. My father and I have rebuilt something between us, slowly. It is not what it was, and I don't think it ever will be. But he comes in on Monday mornings and we do the work side by side. I still think about the way Renwick looked at me when he said the company was mine to protect. I understand now he wasn't only talking about the financials. He was telling me the whole thing was already handled. I just had to stay steady long enough to find out.